Good afternoon and welcome to Willow's Green Permaculture. Today I'd like to talk about why we don't do everything. What do I mean by that? Well, when we first came here over 6 years ago, we were open to pretty well anything, and we were prepared to do pretty well everything. We wanted to do maybe an acre to an acre and a half of crops, do the market gardening, do the CSA shares, get all sorts of different animals, goats, chickens, sheep, do milk, do cheese, get eggs, the whole kit and caboodle. But then we didn't. So today I'm going to give you all the reasons why we don't do everything here as homesteaders. So if this is something you're interested in, then let's get started. So when Magali and I started planning this new life here, back in 2019 we were planning it, summer of 2019, we started to look for a place. Magali did most of the looking. And basically what we wanted was something south of the Canadian Shield in Ontario. Anywhere from Windsor to Ottawa to Penetang to the Niagara Peninsula. Anywhere, but it had to be south of the Canadian Shield. We didn't want to have to try and plant in rock. So we had a wide catchment, and we almost got a place close to Windsor, but it didn't pass the inspection. And then we found this place here, and we had it all planned. We were gonna do, we wanted a lot of space. We got 2.5 acres, 1 hectare. It was about pretty well the smallest area that we wanted, because we were expecting to need at least an acre to an acre and a half to, let's say, farm on. And then the other acre and a half would be forest, and it would include the house that's already here and all the rest of it. And we were planning on doing everything that I mentioned in the intro and a lot more. But within a few weeks of arriving here, we saw some major challenges that made us realize that, at least for the short term, we were only going to have about 1/10 of an acre to be able to work with. And a whole lot of challenges to deal with. But here's the thing. That big challenge, which was a huge flood that we had 3 weeks after moving in January of 2020, was in the end a blessing, because it made us realize what this piece of land really was and really could be. And it also made us realize what we would be able to do with what we have. What do I mean by that? Well, before coming here, I'd spent 25 years restoring habitats, gardening in schools with my kids, with my students, teaching my students in schools how to grow their own food, going out into different conservation areas and different public parks and different places and restoring habitat with my students. And when I was a vice principal, I did the same thing, but with my entire schools. And I also, as a teacher and a vice principal, I was doing stuff between schools, getting older kids to teach younger kids how to do things, even within the same school, all of it. And so I had a lot of experience already doing this kind of thing. So I had big ideas, because I'd done work in big areas with, several hundred students. So I was ready to work on a big area, even if it was just Magali and me. And that's what I was expecting I would need, because I had never worked on this scale before. I'd never tried to grow all my own food. But my baseline was, we're going to work with nature. We're going to have nature come along with us and help us along the way. And we were immediately, right from the get-go, forced to realize that we were going to have to work with a small space, 1/10 of an acre, at least at the beginning. So that's what we did. And then as we went along, we realized how much that we could do on that 1/10 of an acre. And you've seen all that, and I'm not going to get into it. You You can watch any one of my videos. Our main garden is 1/10 of an acre. But I wanted to get goats or sheep to do milk, and I wanted to get chickens for eggs, maybe get rabbits for meat and other stuff. Want to do it all. We did the canning. We're right now we're learning lots about fermenting and we did pickles, and we still do pickling and all the rest of it. All the stuff, all of it. And we wanted to do the market gardening and the CSAs and so on. But as we worked, we realized, how much work this can be. And it's a lot of work. And, and we'd watch, I'd watch YouTubers, ones who do it all, the homesteaders who do everything, what I've described. And watching them, it was exhausting watching it. How do you do all that? Just two people. And I realized, something that I've known for a long, long time. When you try and do too much and you spread yourself too thin, what you end up doing is nothing at all, at least not well. We had learned about so many people who tried to do everything, tried to do it all, and then after maybe a year and a half, maybe two, they just gave it all up, because it was just too much. Exhaustion, overextension. Patience is one thing I've always known, one thing that nature has taught me. With patience, you see great results. And so I knew that, do things one at a time. Start with the food. Start with setting it up. So we set it up. What I mean by that is we set it up so that nature would participate with us. We put in all sorts of native wildflowers, native fruiting shrubs, and other native plants and trees to attract native wildlife here, to do all the planting for us. And I've spoken about that in videos too. But what I want to get at here is within the first year, our first summer of 2020, we harvested enough to get through most of the winter with many of the things that we harvested. That was really fast, and on that 1/10 of an acre I spoke to you about. But I still had those plans for animals and all the rest of it. But as time went by, I realized that the other things, you don't need to do it all yourself. Because when you're living this life, it's important to build community. You see, because we're not preppers. We're not here to prove to you that you don't need community, that you don't need society. Just the opposite. We're not going to try and show you how to hoard your food, how to can it so it'll last 10 years, how to build bunkers, how to prepare for when society falls apart. I'm not a proponent of that view of the world. Sure, there might be crises, but I'm not a proponent of the fact that there's going to be anarchy. Because I believe in society. I believe in people. Yeah, there are bad people out there, but there will always be exponentially more good people than bad out there. And if we're seeing more bad than you might think these days, well, that's just because it's cleanup time, and then you can't clean up unless you see the rot. So when you see the rot, you do the cleanup. And while you're doing the cleanup, you look for it all. You get it all out. And what I mean by rot, it's not people. It's not a certain person or a certain group. There's structures in society that over time have developed, slowly in different ways, and sometimes very innocently and sometimes not, which have allowed a certain amount of corruption to take hold and to build and to get established. That has to be dealt with. It's not the fault of a single person or a group of people, because they've developed over time. They're just the symptoms of the underlying problem, because if you get rid of them or that person or whatever without dealing with the underlying problem, then someone else is just going to eventually take their place. And so that's what I'm talking about when I'm talking about rot. Finding solutions that will last. And sometimes the universe has to show you where the rot is. And so sometimes you have to go through some bad times to know what you have to do. But you know, people say it's really bad these days. I challenge you to give me any date in all of world history, whether it's 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 30 years ago, 80 years ago, 100 years ago, whenever, 18th century, 19th century, 20th century, 2,000 years ago, whatever. I challenge you to give me a date where there weren't any challenges, social justice challenges that existed at the time. And let me tell you in advance that apart from gardening and nature as a passion of mine, and languages, as many of you know, is also a passion of mine, and learning and science, music. Another one is history. Both Magali and I are historians by, let's say, by studies. I minored in history when I was in university. So I challenge you to give me a date where there weren't some really big problems that needed to be solved at the time. You know, I just think of when I was growing up in the 70s, all the problems that were back then. My goodness, I'd walk barefoot in the street to go from my house to the local swimming pool, and I'd have to avoid all the broken glass in the street and the garbage. In small town Ontario. You don't see that anymore. Not here anyway. So we're not preppers, and we're not here to prove that society is evil. We're not here to prove that we can be independent from society. Maybe earlier on in my videos I was talking a lot about food autonomy. I can't remember the term I used, but to be autonomous as far as growing your food and stuff. But as we've grown through this project and learned through this project over the last, now almost 6.5 years, it's community that's important. Building community. You don't have to do it all, because you can have people close to you, your friends, your neighbors, the people in the larger community, but still not far away. Or you can trade for the different kinds of things. And we trade vegetables for our eggs and other stuff too. You see, early on, Maggie and I watched a lot of videos with different homesteaders, and there was a lot of interesting stuff out there and a lot of really good stuff. But you know, we'd watch and we'd see some of them with their big machinery, and we'd think, wow, you know, that's a lot of money. Keeping, and also lots of having to keep gas and all the maintenance and all that kind of stuff, and we wanted to do everything by hand. You know, because that's another reason why you need a lot of space. If you have big machinery that you're going to do your growing with, well, you're going to need more space between your rows and all the rest of it. You know, and all that stuff costs money. And when you want to try and do everything, another thing is, if you want all the animals, you want your goats, you want your sheep, you want your chickens, you want your rabbits, well, you're going to need shelters for all those. And you're going to need bedding for all of them. You know, all the wood chips or the sawdust. Cleaning it out, paying attention, because they're living beings. They need attention. They need love. You're going to need the time to take care of them. You know, it's a full-time job just growing plants and taking care of the plants and giving the plants their love, and the nature, it's love, giving nature the love. But also to have all sorts of animals and to be able to give them all the love too, and them all the attention. That's 2 different full-time jobs you got there. You know, it was, like I said, it was exhausting watching some of these homesteaders and all the stuff they do. But I'm sure, you know, there are ways of doing it, I guess. But at our age, and you know, we wanted to concentrate on something else. Grow what we need to feed ourselves, feed our family, and maybe have time also to produce a little bit more that we can sell, to have the money we need to cover whatever bills that we need to cover. And so it's all about choosing priorities. Where your greatest skills lie, the ones that you can share, and the areas where it would be best if you let somebody else do those, and then you try and find a way of sharing. And so it's trying to find the wisdom of the old walkable communities. You know, obviously a lot has changed in the world since communities were simply walkable, and basically everybody was in a small community. You had your doctor, you had your mechanic, you had your carpenter, your house builder, your everything. You know, the doctor was probably the veterinarian too, and you had your grower of food, and you had your grower of cattle, and all the rest of it. You know, it was all within a walkable community. But obviously, we've also learned a lot. There's a lot that we need to relearn that we've forgotten. But there's also a lot that we've learned in modern society that can help as well. And you know, one of the main things I would think is to not look at nature as the enemy. You know, I remember growing up and you know, in language classes, you know, in English class and French class in high school, talking about books and novels and so on, or theater, and there was always a conflict. And I remember one of the main conflicts they'd always talk about is man against nature, which is absurd, absolutely absurd. Nature is not a conflict up against which one must throw oneself. Nature is abundance. Nature is joy. Nature's life. And yes, nature can be sometimes overwhelming, but that's because nature is full of life and abundance, and it's full of waves that we need to learn to ride. And so yeah, it's looking for that balance, that wisdom, to try and recreate a walkable community where people can work together and share their talents in order to better the lives of everybody included. That's probably the main reason why we don't do everything. Let me check my notes. Now, why don't we sell vegetables? Well, that one's an easy one to answer. There's no way we can compete with the grocery store. Even with the more expensive, let's say, organic produce, it's still way cheaper than we could ever produce it, when you think about it. Because obviously what we produce goes way beyond organic. Nature's included in what we do. You know, organic, officially organic, they have all sorts of products that they're allowed to use and percentages and so on. As far as I'm concerned, it's not really organic. Basically, you know, we produce with nature. But there are lots of videos about that. I'm not going to talk about that here. However, what I mean, you know, there's no way we could compete, you know, to sell certain things for the prices that they're sold for, even in markets. The amount of time needed to put into it. I would prefer, and it's what we've decided to do, to sell things that don't have, you know, like you sell vegetables. If you don't sell them all, if you grew too many or whatever, then they're just gonna, you know, if you can only preserve a certain amount. And of course you can give stuff away as well, be generous, give away to food banks and so on. But one way or another, I mean, it all takes time to grow and so on. And vegetables, they don't have a shelf life beyond a few weeks or a few months or whatever, depending on which ones they are. And so if we're going to sell stuff, we'd rather sell stuff that we can hold on to. You know, things like seeds. Seeds don't last forever either, but we can test them. We can see how viable they are. We won't sell non-viable seeds. Or plants, perennial plants, native perennial or non-native perennial plants. Trees, shrubs, flowers, herbs, edible flowers, all that stuff. Whatever we don't sell, we can hold on to. You know, when you hold on to something past an initial season, then often you just need to transplant it into bigger pots and stuff like that, if needed. And then you have them for the following year. You know, they're not going to rot away or whatever, especially if you don't know how to take care of them. For me, that's a much more stable way of looking at things. And so that's why we don't participate in the market gardening and the CSA and all the rest of it. It's just, it's too much the same paradigm as has existed for a century. We want a new paradigm, one that concentrates on community, not the market. You know, money is an abstract thing, very abstract. From the moment money was invented, economies were doomed to fail because The basic needs of life, food and shelter, they're concrete. I don't talk about the big needs of life like love and so on, but the basic needs of life, food, shelter, healthcare, these are concrete things. You can't put an abstract onto them. You can't put an abstract idea onto the concrete idea of human labor. If I'm standing in front of you and, you're going to come and operate on my horse, let's say, if I had a horse, because of some problem. And I say, well, here, I'm going to give you a chicken to operate on my horse. And, we're people that we've known each other for several years, maybe our kids, our friends. When you're face to face with the person who's going to do a job for you and you have a job to do for them, each of you will respect the work of the other. There's no real difference between one type of work and another. Between a carpenter and a consultant, there's no real difference. Each has its value. And so you can't put an abstract value on that. And then when you add on to the abstract value of, okay, we're going to pay a certain amount for this labor and then a certain different amount for this labor, and then suddenly you add on to that the even more abstract idea of the money of one country or area in the world has a higher value than the money of another country or of an area of the world, and suddenly those differences in let's say what somebody earns from the work they do is suddenly changed even more because of that other even larger abstract. It's just doomed to fail. Doomed to fail. Doomed to fail for the vast majority of the human population. 99% of the human population. Which means it's a failure for that other 1% as well. Because what kind of world is that to live in? As far as I'm concerned, it's a type of worship. We're worshiping money. We're worshiping the economy. The economy is like a church. And the big economists that they pronounce a few words and then the economy of a country plummets. Well, those are like priests or popes or whatever you want to call it. An economy, worshiping it like that, it's just like another religion, except that it's a religion that has no good core values. All of the big world religions basically share the same essential core values. And I know there's probably some of you out there who say, no, there's only one. Mine, whatever that mine is. But those people who are open, whether you're Christian or Buddhist or Muslim or Hindu or Jewish or of a religion of one of the First Nations, and the words, the technical terms escape me. They all have the same core values. And we are all people who share this planet with animals and with other people and insects and all the rest of it, and nature and plants and everything. And so living well on this planet means living in a more concrete fashion. I'm not saying there's no place for the abstract. I love art and I love science, and sometimes even in science you need to think abstractly. But in order to live well, you need to be anchored, grounded in something more concrete. And economics is not concrete. I love math, by the way. That's another one of my passions. And so, yes, basic economics is important. You don't want to spend more than you earn. So living more concretely, what does that mean? It means seeking out relationships with other people and sharing talent, sharing knowledge, and sharing love, sharing joy, sharing stories, sharing challenges, not being shy about sharing challenges, not being shy about saying, I don't know how to do this, can you help me? Not being shy about saying, I'm not an expert, can you help me? I'm not saying we need to eliminate money, but what we do need to do is mitigate the abstracting and dehumanizing way that money can reduce human labor to an abstract concept rather than to the lived lives of those people doing that labor. Those people, their children, their loved ones, their families. And how do you do that? You do that by creating community. Because when you're face to face with someone doing that work, and you have an honest relationship with that person because you see them every day and you don't live far away from each other. Nothing wrong with having relationships with people who live on the other side of the planet. But to really know someone, well, it helps to live close to them. And so when you're able to develop that relationship, it's really hard for any of that dehumanization to take place. And so that needs to be a priority if we are to continue using the economy as some kind of a basis, using money as a basis for society. How do you do that? Well, creating community. Always standing up for those who are more vulnerable than we are, whoever they are. And asking for help when we need it. And giving of our expertise freely. Because whenever you give freely in a way that will help others, in a way that will benefit others, that gift will come back to you 1,000-fold. 7 times 77-fold, it's been said. Or 1,000-fold. Or those waves that you send up will come waving back to you in a cycle that will never end. Each one of us, every single one of you, has a light to shine in this world. That light that you have to shine has been there since before you even came here. And the plan was to shine it. So you can't be shy about it. You can't be shy about shining your light. So in the end, in our case here, rather than trying to do it all, rather than try to prove that, hey, we can live independent of society, watch us. No. I would rather shine a light on what each one of us can do. And in my case, those things that I'm able to do, I would rather shine a light on how I do them, to teach you how to do them, and to do what we can. And for the things that we can't, we don't have enough time, enough energy, enough money, enough whatever. For those things that, let's say, we choose not to do, or we just don't have the expertise to do them, well, then to find ways to exchange for them. But exchange face to face as much as possible. If each one of you were to shine your personal light, share your talents, everyone in the world did that, how would the world be a different place? Oh, the world is already an amazing place. Life is amazing. Life is beautiful. Focus on that. Focus on shining your light, and the world will light up. So that's why we don't do everything. Because if we tried to, at some point, the lights would all go out. From exhaustion, from being overextended. And you know, one of the main ways that we can all assure that society, that the community will live on and on and on and flourish is by relearning how to live in harmony with nature. Not only because it's the right thing to do, not only because in many of the world religions we were sort of meant to be the guardians of nature, but also because nature is life. Nature is abundance. Nature is community. Nature is cooperation. And when we learn from nature and realize that we can live with nature, cooperate with nature, then we'll be always surrounded by abundance. And we will always have what we need. I hope you liked the video. Hope you learned something from it. You found it useful. If you liked it, then please give it the thumbs up and share it with your friends. Don't forget to leave a question or a comment. As you know, I answer all of your questions and respond to your comments. And if you need any seeds or anything like that, check out our website. You can buy some seeds from us, and there's going to be other stuff too in the near future. So one way you can support what we do here at Willows Green Permaculture. Thank you very much for watching. Have a wonderful week, and we will see you next time.